There is a small mark on the ceiling. I am sure it was not there before. My wife was standing in the bathroom doorway, still wrapped in her towel, her hair dripping onto the tile floor. She was pointing up at the ceiling above the shower, at a spot I had never noticed in 5 years of living in this house. "It is probably nothing," I said. "Maybe a water stain or something from the humidity." "No." She shook her head, her voice carrying an edge I did not recognize. "I shower here every single day, Nathan. I know every crack, every tile, every imperfection in these walls. I have stared at that ceiling 1,000 times while I rinse my hair. That mark was not there yesterday. I am absolutely certain of it." I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to tell her she was being paranoid, that she was seeing things, that there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for a small discoloration on a bathroom ceiling. But something in her eyes stopped me. Fear. Real, visceral fear that I had never seen in her before, not in 6 years of marriage. I did not argue. I did not question her further. I walked to the garage, grabbed the stepladder, and climbed up to take a closer look at what my wife had found. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Behind a carefully cut hole in the ceiling tile, no larger than a dime, tucked into the pink insulation where no one would ever think to look, was a camera. A small, professional-grade wireless camera with a wide-angle lens and a tiny blinking red light that indicated it was actively recording at that very moment. The lens was angled with precision, positioned to capture the entire shower area. The exact spot where my wife stood naked every single morning while she thought she was alone. I did not yell. I did not panic. I did not rip the camera from its hiding place and smash it against the bathroom wall, though every fiber of my being screamed at me to do exactly that. Instead, I took several photographs with my phone, documenting the position and angle from multiple perspectives. Then I carefully replaced the ceiling tile exactly as I had found it and climbed down from the ladder. My wife was watching me from the doorway, her face pale as chalk, her hands trembling at her sides. The towel she had wrapped around herself suddenly seemed inadequate, and she pulled it tighter, as if trying to protect herself from something that had already happened. "What is it?" she whispered. "Nathan, what did you find up there? You look like you have seen a ghost." I could not answer her. Not yet. Not until I knew who had done this, how long it had been there, and exactly what they had captured on that device. Not until I had proof that would hold up in a court of law. "Stay here," I said, keeping my voice as calm and steady as I could manage. "Do not touch anything in this bathroom. Do not tell anyone what you found. I need to check something in my office. Nathan, you are scaring me. Please, just tell me what is going on." "I will. I promise I will explain everything. But I need a few hours first. Can you trust me?" She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving my face. "I trust you," she said. "Find out who did this to me." 3 hours later I had my answer, and nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, 37 years of them. My name is Nathan Parker. I am 37 years old, and I work as a cybersecurity consultant for some of the largest corporations in the country. My job is to find vulnerabilities in computer systems, to spot the tiny cracks that hackers could exploit, to protect networks and databases from people who want to steal data or cause harm. I have spent 15 years building a reputation as one of the best in my field. Fortune 500 companies pay me substantial fees to find their weaknesses before criminals do. I have testified as an expert witness in federal cybercrime cases. I have consulted for government agencies whose names I am not supposed to mention in casual conversation. The irony is not lost on me that I failed to see the threat living under my own roof, the predator sleeping in my guest room, the enemy eating breakfast at my kitchen table every morning while I poured him coffee and asked about his job search. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, a prosperous suburb of Chicago where the lawns were always perfectly manicured and the families always looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Howard and Patricia Parker, were pillars of the community. My father was a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, the kind of man who played golf on weekends, complained about his taxes, and measured his worth by the size of his house and the model of his car. My mother was a homemaker who volunteered at the church, organized neighborhood events, and made absolutely certain that everyone in her social circle knew how successful and admirable her family was. From the outside, we were the ideal American family, living the ideal American dream in the ideal American suburb. From the inside, it was a very different story. I have a brother named Ethan. He is 2 years older than me, and from the moment I was born, I existed in his shadow. Ethan was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the son my parents had always dreamed of having. He was handsome, with our mother's striking blue eyes and our father's strong jaw. He was charming, able to talk his way out of any trouble and into any opportunity that presented itself. He was athletic, starring on the football team and the baseball team and any other team that would have him. And he was effortlessly successful at everything he tried, coasting through school on natural talent and charisma while I struggled and studied for every single grade. Teachers loved Ethan. Girls loved Ethan. Our parents worshipped Ethan like he was some kind of deity who had descended from the heavens to bless their ordinary suburban lives with his extraordinary presence. And then there was me, the quiet one, the awkward one, the one who preferred computers to sports, who spent weekends alone in his room learning to code instead of going to parties and football games, who never quite fit in with the other kids no matter how hard he tried. I was not a bad kid. I was not a troublemaker or a disappointment in any objective sense. I got good grades, stayed out of trouble, did everything my parents asked of me without complaint. But I was not Ethan. I could never be Ethan. And in the Parker household, that was an unforgivable sin. I remember being 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon, showing my mother a program I had written on our family computer. It was a simple thing, just a calculator application that could add and subtract and multiply, but I had taught myself to code from library books over the course of several months, and I was incredibly proud of what I had created. I wanted her to see it, to acknowledge that I had accomplished something special, to look at me with the same pride and admiration she always showed for Ethan. She glanced at the screen for maybe 3 seconds, maybe less. "That is nice, honey," she said, already turning back to whatever she had been doing before I interrupted her. "But your brother has a baseball game in an hour. We need to start getting ready to leave." I sat there at that kitchen table for a long time after she walked away, staring at the lines of code I had spent weeks perfecting. 3 seconds. That was all the attention I warranted. 3 seconds and a dismissive comment before she rushed off to watch Ethan hit a ball with a wooden stick. That moment crystallized something for me, even at 8 years old. I understood, in a way I could not have articulated at the time, that I would always come second. That no matter what I accomplished, no matter how hard I worked, I would never be enough for them. Not compared to Ethan. That was the pattern of my entire childhood. Every achievement I earned was met with polite disinterest, quickly forgotten in the rush to celebrate whatever Ethan had done that week. When I won the state science fair at 15 with a project on network security that the judges called remarkably sophisticated for someone his age, my parents forgot to pick me up from the awards ceremony. I waited for 3 hours in an empty parking lot, clutching my first-place ribbon, before finally swallowing my pride and calling a friend's mother for a ride home. When I arrived, they were throwing a party for Ethan because he had been named homecoming king. No one even asked me how the science fair had gone. When I got accepted to Carnegie Mellon University with a full academic scholarship to study computer science, one of the most competitive programs in the country, my father's immediate response was to ask if I could defer my enrollment for a year so I could help Ethan move into his new apartment. Ethan had gotten into a mediocre state school with middling grades, coasting on a partial athletic scholarship, but somehow his move-in logistics were more important than my full ride to one of the best programs in my field. I always said yes. I always helped. I always swallowed my disappointment and my resentment and told myself that maybe next time would be different. Maybe next time they would finally see me. Maybe next time I would do something impressive enough to earn their attention. They never saw me. No matter what I accomplished, it was never enough. The only person in my family who ever truly saw me for who I was, who ever made me feel like I mattered, was my grandmother. Her name was Eleanor Parker, my father's mother, and she was unlike anyone else in my family. She was a sharp woman with silver hair and piercing gray eyes, a former bookkeeper who had worked her way up from nothing during an era when women were expected to stay home and raise children without complaint. She had put herself through night school while working full-time, started her own small accounting practice in her 40s, and built a comfortable retirement through nothing but hard work and sheer determination. She saw through the family dynamics with a clarity that no one else possessed, or perhaps no one else was willing to acknowledge. "Your brother has charm," she told me once, when I was about 15 years old and feeling particularly invisible after yet another forgotten achievement. We were sitting on her back porch, drinking lemonade she had made from scratch, watching the sun set over her meticulously maintained garden. "He knows how to make people like him. That is a useful skill, I suppose. But charm is just a mask, Nathan. It is what people wear when they do not want you to see what is underneath. You have substance, real substance, and that is worth more than all the charm in the world." I held onto those words like a drowning man holds onto a life preserver. On the nights when I felt most alone, most invisible, most worthless, I would lie in bed and remember what my grandmother had said. I had substance. I was worth something, even if my parents could not see it, even if the world seemed to value Ethan's easy charm over my quiet competence. I had substance. Grandma Eleanor passed away when I was 26, peacefully in her sleep, and she left me a small inheritance in her will. $42,000, which my parents thought should have gone to them or to Ethan. They actually argued with the estate attorney about it, claiming there must have been some mistake, some confusion, some error in the paperwork. But Grandma Eleanor had been very explicit in her instructions. The money was for Nathan and Nathan alone, and it was not to be shared with or claimed by any other family member under any circumstances. I used that money as seed capital to start my own cybersecurity consulting firm. I worked 18-hour days for years, building my reputation one client at a time, sacrificing sleep and social life and everything else in pursuit of the success I knew I was capable of achieving. Within 10 years, I had grown the company into a firm with 22 employees and annual revenues exceeding $4 million. I had accomplished exactly what my grandmother always believed I could accomplish. I had turned substance into undeniable, measurable success. But none of that mattered to my parents. When I told them about my company's growth, about the major clients I had landed, about the federal cases I had consulted on, my mother's response was to ask if I could lend Ethan some money because he was having trouble making his mortgage payment that month. To them, I was still the awkward kid who preferred computers to people. Still the disappointment who could never measure up to their golden child. Still the son who existed only in the margins of their attention. When I met Sarah, I genuinely believed my luck had finally changed. She was a physical therapist who worked at a rehabilitation clinic downtown, helping people recover from injuries and surgeries, and she possessed a warmth and kindness that seemed to radiate from her very being. We met at a coffee shop near my office when I accidentally knocked my drink off the counter and it splashed all over her laptop. I was mortified. I started apologizing profusely, stumbling over my words, offering to pay for repairs or buy her a new laptop entirely, fully expecting her to be furious with me for ruining her afternoon and potentially her work files. But instead of anger, she just laughed. "Well," she said, wiping coffee off her keyboard with a stack of napkins, "this is officially the most exciting thing that has happened to me all week, maybe all month." We ended up talking for 3 hours at that coffee shop, long after her laptop had dried off and my embarrassment had faded. I bought her a replacement laptop the next day, the nicest model I could find, and she insisted on repaying me by taking me to dinner. One dinner became 2, then 3, then a year of the happiest, most fulfilling memories I had ever made in my entire life. Sarah did not care about my money or my professional achievements or my growing reputation in the cybersecurity world. She did not compare me to anyone else or measure my worth against some impossible standard. She just liked me for who I was, awkward silences and all. We were married 2 years later, in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Vermont. My parents complained about absolutely everything. The venue was too small and too informal. There were not enough guests to properly celebrate such an occasion. The food was not fancy enough for their tastes. It was nothing like Ethan's wedding, they pointed out repeatedly, which had been a lavish affair with 300 guests and a 12-piece band and an open bar that cost more than my entire ceremony. Sarah did not let their criticism bother her for a single moment. She held my hand during the reception and whispered in my ear, "This is perfect. You are perfect, and I would marry you 1,000 times over, no matter what anyone else in the world thinks about it. I believed her. For the first time in my 33 years on this planet, I genuinely believed that I was enough just as I was. We bought a house in a quiet suburb, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with original hardwood floors and a big backyard that backed up to a forest preserve. We talked about having children someday, about building the kind of loving, supportive family I had always wanted but never had growing up. We were happy in a way I had not known was possible. We were building something real. And then Ethan's carefully constructed life fell completely apart. It happened about 3.5 years ago. His wife, a woman named Jennifer who had always seemed far too intelligent to have married him, finally reached the absolute limit of her patience. She filed for divorce, citing years of lies, broken promises, and financial mismanagement that Ethan had hidden from everyone, including his own parents. She took their 2 children and moved to California, putting as much distance between herself and Ethan as she could manage without leaving the country entirely. Without Jennifer's steady income to prop things up, Ethan's marketing firm collapsed almost immediately. It turned out he had been running it into the ground for years, taking on massive amounts of debt to maintain appearances, making promises to clients he could not possibly keep, driving away business with his arrogance and his inability to deliver results. Within 6 months of the divorce being finalized, he had lost his house to foreclosure, had his car repossessed, watched his business declare bankruptcy, and was left with nothing but the clothes in his closet and the charm that had always gotten him out of trouble before. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying that particular pleading tone she only used when Ethan needed something from me. "Nathan," she said, "your brother is in serious trouble. He has nowhere to go. He has lost everything. I know you have that big house with all those empty rooms just sitting there unused. It would only be for a few months, just until he gets back on his feet and finds a new job. You would hardly even notice he was there. A few months. That was the promise she made. That was what she swore to me." Sarah was hesitant when I told her about the conversation. She had met my family on multiple occasions. She had witnessed the subtle digs, the dismissive comments, the way my parents talked about Ethan as if he were a conquering hero returning from war while barely acknowledging my existence in the same room. She understood the family dynamics better than anyone outside the situation possibly could. "Are you sure about this?" she asked me that night, her voice careful and measured. "I know he is your brother, and I know family is important to you, but living with someone is different from seeing them at holidays. This could change everything." "I know," I said, "but maybe this is my chance to finally have a real relationship with him. Maybe if I help him when he really needs it, things will be different between us. Between all of us." She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with those kind, perceptive eyes that always seemed to see right through to the heart of things. "If this is what you want to do," she finally said, "then we will do it together. But promise me something, Nathan. Anything. Promise me that if it does not work out, if he makes our lives difficult or disrespects our home, you will not hesitate to ask him to leave. I need to know that our marriage comes first, that we come first." "We do," I said, taking her hands in mine. "We always will. I promise." So Ethan moved into our guest room. It was a nice room, on the first floor of the house, with its own private bathroom and a small sitting area with a television. Better accommodations than most people receive when they have lost everything through their own poor decisions, but Ethan accepted it as if it were his due, as if we owed him this kindness simply because we happened to share DNA. The first few months were tolerable, or at least they seemed tolerable on the surface. Ethan expressed gratitude, or at least he performed gratitude in a convincing manner. He helped with yard work occasionally. He cooked dinner a few times using recipes he found online. He made an effort to stay out of our way and not disrupt our routines too severely. He told us he was applying for jobs, networking with old professional contacts, working diligently to rebuild his career and get back on his feet. I believed him because I desperately wanted to believe him, because believing him was so much easier than confronting the alternative, because I had spent my entire life hoping that Ethan would change, that we would finally have the brotherly relationship I had always craved, and this situation seemed like it might finally make that possible. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Every time I gently suggested that perhaps it was time for him to start looking for his own apartment, my mother would call with some excuse or guilt trip about how hard he was trying and how cruel it would be to push him out before he was ready. Every time Sarah expressed growing discomfort with the extended arrangement, Ethan would turn on his legendary charm, cracking jokes, offering to take us out to dinner at expensive restaurants using the emergency credit card I had given him. Every time I felt a nagging sense that something was not quite right, I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting old childhood resentments cloud my judgment of a man who was genuinely trying to improve his situation. I should have listened to that persistent feeling of unease. I should have trusted my professional instincts. I had spent my entire career teaching clients to trust their instincts when something seemed off, and I completely failed to follow my own advice when it mattered most. The morning Sarah found the mark on the ceiling was a Thursday, roughly 3.5 years after Ethan had moved into our home. She had the day off from the clinic and was taking a leisurely morning shower while I answered client emails in my home office down the hall. I heard her call my name around 9:30, her voice carrying an unusual urgency that made me immediately push back from my desk. When I reached the bathroom, she was standing in the doorway, dripping wet, wrapped in a towel, pointing at the ceiling above the shower with a trembling finger. "I know this probably sounds paranoid," she said, her voice shaky, "but that mark right there, that little dark spot near the light fixture, it was not there yesterday. I would stake my life on it. Any other husband might have dismissed this concern. Any other husband might have told his wife she was imagining things, that it was just a shadow or a water stain or a trick of the light, that she was being unnecessarily paranoid about nothing. But I am not any other husband. I have spent my entire professional life looking for exactly these kinds of anomalies. The small details that seem completely insignificant but turn out to be evidence of something much more sinister lurking beneath the surface." I grabbed the stepladder from the garage without saying another word. What I found, hidden behind a carefully cut hole in the ceiling tile, was a wireless surveillance camera. Compact, professional grade, equipped with a wide-angle lens designed to capture as much of the surrounding area as possible. The tiny red indicator light was blinking in a steady rhythm, confirming active recording. The device was positioned at the perfect angle to capture the entire shower area, every inch of space where my wife had been standing naked and vulnerable every single morning for what I would later discover was 18 months. My professional training kicked in immediately, overriding the rage and horror churning in my gut. Do not disturb the evidence. Document everything thoroughly. Follow the digital trail wherever it leads. I took photographs from multiple angles, carefully noting the exact position of the camera, the type of device, the model number visible on its casing, the routing of the thin black wire that connected it to a power source hidden in the attic insulation. Then I replaced the ceiling tile exactly as I had found it and climbed down from the ladder. Sarah was watching me with wide, terrified eyes, her arms wrapped around herself as if she were trying to physically hold herself together. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said. "Someone has been watching you, recording you." The color drained completely from her face. She clutched the towel tighter around her body, suddenly aware of her own vulnerability in a way she had never been before. "Who?" she whispered. "Who would do something like this to me? I do not know yet, but I am going to find out. I need you to stay calm. I need you to act completely normal around everyone in this house. Do not say anything to anyone, not even your family. Can you do that for me?" She nodded slowly, her jaw clenched tight, her eyes glistening with tears she was fighting desperately to hold back. "I trust you," she said. "Find out who did this, and make them pay." I went to my home office and locked the heavy door behind me. As a cybersecurity professional, I had installed enterprise-grade network monitoring equipment on my home system years ago. Every single device that connected to our Wi-Fi network, every packet of data that flowed in or out, I could see it all logged in meticulous detail. I had implemented this level of surveillance partly for professional reasons, to maintain a secure environment for sensitive client work I sometimes brought home, and partly out of the same professional paranoia that had served me well throughout my career. Now that paranoia was about to prove its worth in the most personal way imaginable. Within 15 minutes of systematic analysis, I had found what I was looking for. An unknown device had been connecting to my home network consistently for the past 18 months. The MAC address matched the camera manufacturer I had identified from my photographs. The device was transmitting compressed video data to another device on my local network at regular intervals throughout each day. I traced the connection methodically, following the digital breadcrumbs through layers of network logs and connection timestamps. The recipient device was not difficult to identify. It was a laptop that connected to my network every single day, usually in the evening hours when its owner returned home from whatever activities he claimed to be pursuing during the day. My brother's laptop. I sat there in my leather office chair for a very long time, staring at the damning evidence displayed across my monitors, desperately trying to make the data say something different than what it so clearly and irrefutably said. My brother, Ethan, the golden child, the charmer, the man my parents had always loved more than me. He had been secretly recording my wife in our shower for 18 months. A year and a half of intimate footage captured without her knowledge or consent, stored on his personal computer while he lived in my house, ate food I paid for, used credit cards I provided, and looked my wife in the eye every single morning over breakfast. The rage that built inside me was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It was not the hot, explosive anger I had felt as a child when my parents forgot about me yet again. This was something entirely different. Cold and calculating, a precise fury that sharpened my analytical focus rather than clouding my judgment. I did not want to confront him immediately and give him any opportunity to lie, to delete evidence, to spin some story that my parents would inevitably believe. I wanted to build a case so thorough, so comprehensive, so absolutely airtight that there would be no possible escape. No excuses. No way for my mother to dismiss what he had done as some kind of innocent misunderstanding. I spent the next 3 hours doing what I do best. I remotely accessed his laptop through vulnerabilities in his network configuration, which was embarrassingly easy given that he had never bothered to change any default passwords or implement even basic security measures despite living with a cybersecurity expert. I found the surveillance footage stored in a folder labeled with my wife's initials. 247 hours of video files, meticulously organized by date in subfolders, spanning exactly 18 months of recordings. I found the purchase record for the camera, bought from an online electronics retailer using the emergency credit card I had given him for groceries and essential expenses. I found the shipping confirmation, showing delivery to our home address on a weekend when Sarah and I had been visiting friends in Wisconsin for a long weekend. I found extensive browser history showing that he had spent weeks researching how to install hidden cameras, how to position them for optimal viewing angles, how to route wiring to avoid detection, how to configure remote access for convenient viewing. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment or a single terrible decision made in a moment of weakness. This was premeditated, carefully planned, methodically executed over an extended period of time. By noon, I had assembled a complete dossier that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. Purchase records with timestamps. Installation timeline reconstructed from his browser history. Network access logs showing every time he viewed the footage. Transmission data proving the direct connection between the camera and his personal device. Everything documented with the same precision and thoroughness I would bring to a federal cybercrime investigation. My brother had violated my wife in the most intimate way imaginable, and I had the irrefutable proof to make him pay for every single moment of it. Then I went to find Sarah and tell her what I had discovered. She was sitting alone in the living room, staring blankly at the wall, her face pale and drawn with the weight of what she already suspected. She looked up immediately when I entered, and I could see the desperate question burning in her eyes. "I found out who did it," I said, settling onto the couch beside her and taking her cold hands in mine. "Who?" I took a deep breath. There was no gentle way to deliver this information. It was Ethan. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. Sarah's face cycled through emotions faster than I could track or process. Confusion, disbelief, horror, revulsion, and finally, settling into a rage that perfectly matched the cold fury burning in my own chest. "Ethan?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "Your brother Ethan? The one who has been living in our house, sleeping down the hall from our bedroom, for 3.5 years. Yes, the one I cook breakfast for every morning? The one I do laundry for because he claimed he did not understand how to work our washing machine? The one I have treated like family, invited to birthday dinners and holiday celebrations and summer barbecues. Yes. She pulled her hands away from mine and pressed them hard against her face. Her shoulders began to shake violently, and I realized she was crying deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to originate from somewhere far beneath the surface of her composed exterior. "I feel sick," she gasped between sobs. "Oh God, Nathan, I am going to be sick." She ran to the bathroom, that same violated bathroom, and I heard her retching into the toilet. I followed her, held her hair back from her face, rubbed her shoulders gently, feeling utterly helpless and inadequate. There was nothing I could do to undo what had been done. No words I could possibly say that would make this better. My brother had stolen something precious from my wife that she could never get back, and I was the one who had invited him into our home, given him unfettered access to our lives, trusted him when every instinct should have screamed at me to be suspicious. When she finally stopped vomiting, Sarah collapsed onto the bathroom floor with her back pressed against the cool tile wall, her knees pulled up protectively to her chest. She looked smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her in 6 years of marriage. "What are we going to do now?" she asked, her voice hollow and exhausted and utterly defeated. "I am going to call my parents," I said, the decision crystallizing in my mind even as I spoke the words. "I want them here in this house when we confront him." Sarah looked at me with an expression of pure disbelief. "Your parents? Nathan, they will defend him. They have always defended him, no matter what he does. They will find some way to make this your fault or my fault or anyone's fault but his. Probably, almost certainly, in fact. But I need them to see the evidence with their own eyes. I need them to hear him attempt to explain himself. And I need to see, standing right there in front of me, whose side they choose when there is absolutely no ambiguity about what happened. Then I will finally know for certain what I have always suspected deep down. And then I can be completely done with all of them forever." I called my mother that same afternoon. I told her there was a serious family emergency and that she and my father needed to come to our house immediately. I deliberately did not tell her what the emergency involved. I wanted to see her face, completely unguarded and unprepared, when she learned exactly what her precious golden child had been doing. They arrived approximately 2 hours later, my father looking annoyed at having his Saturday afternoon interrupted for what he clearly assumed was some trivial matter, my mother looking worried in that performative, theatrical way she always adopted when anything potentially threatened Ethan's comfort or reputation. "What is this about?" my father demanded impatiently as soon as he stepped through our front door. "You said it was an emergency. I had to cancel my golf game for this." "It is an emergency," I replied calmly. "Please, come into the living room and sit down." I had arranged the furniture in the living room with careful deliberation. For chairs positioned facing the couch where Ethan typically lounged during his endless unemployed days. My laptop sat ready on the coffee table, prepared to display the evidence at the appropriate moment. Sarah sat beside me on a love seat, her hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel her elevated pulse racing against my palm. "Ethan," I called out toward the guest room. "Come out to the living room right now. We need to talk." He emerged a few moments later, looking rumpled and confused and slightly annoyed at being disturbed. He was still wearing the sweatpants and wrinkled t-shirt he wore around the house every day, his hair uncombed, stubble covering his jaw. "What is going on?" he asked, settling onto the couch with the casual, entitled slouch of someone who had never in his life faced real consequences for his actions. "Why is everyone here looking so serious?" I did not answer his question. Instead, I opened my laptop and rotated the screen so everyone in the room could clearly see the display. "Yesterday morning," I began, keeping my voice steady and cold and utterly controlled. Sarah noticed something unusual on our bathroom ceiling, a small mark that had not been there the day before. I investigated her observation and discovered a hidden camera, professionally installed, positioned directly above the shower, actively recording. My mother gasped with theatrical shock. My father's eyes went wide. Ethan's face went completely pale beneath his stubble, but he recovered with impressive speed, sliding that practiced mask of innocent confusion into place. "That is absolutely insane," he said, his voice carrying just the right note of outraged disbelief. "Who would do something so sick? Do you think someone broke into the house?" "I traced the camera's purchase to an online order placed 18 months ago," I continued, completely ignoring his performance. "Using the emergency credit card I gave you for essential expenses. The surveillance footage has been transmitting directly to your laptop, which I accessed through our home network. There are over 240 hours of recordings stored on your hard drive in organized folders. All of my wife, all captured without her knowledge or consent." The living room went completely, utterly silent. My mother's hand had flown to her chest, her manicured fingers pressing dramatically against her heart. My father was staring at Ethan with an expression I could not quite read. And Ethan, the golden child, the charmer, the man who had talked his way out of every difficult situation for his entire privileged life, was looking at me with an expression I had genuinely never seen on his handsome face before. Pure, undisguised, animal fear. "That is not. There has to be some kind of mistake," he stammered, the legendary charm cracking and crumbling under pressure. "Someone must have stolen my credit card information, or hacked into my computer remotely. You of all people should know how easy that kind of thing is to do. Nate, come on, you know me. You know I would never, ever do something like this. The purchase was initiated from your personal email account, using your saved payment information, with your home address listed for delivery," I replied, my voice flat and emotionless. "The surveillance footage is organized in folders that you created and named. Your browser history shows extensive research into hidden camera installation techniques conducted over several weeks. This was not a mistake or a hack, Ethan. This was carefully planned and deliberately executed. This is absolutely ridiculous." My mother suddenly interjected, her voice sharp with defensive anger and maternal protectiveness. "Nathan, I do not know what kind of sick game you are trying to play here, but you need to stop this right now. Ethan would never do something like that. He is your brother. He is family. He would never betray family this way." I had fully expected this reaction. I had prepared myself emotionally for exactly these words. But actually hearing my mother rush to defend him, even now, even with irrefutable evidence displayed right in front of her eyes, still felt like a serrated knife twisting slowly between my ribs. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice carefully level and controlled, "I have compiled irrefutable digital evidence. This is not a game or a misunderstanding or a setup. Your son has been secretly recording my wife in our shower for 18 consecutive months. I simply do not believe it," my father declared, crossing his arms stubbornly over his chest. "Ethan, look at me. Tell them the truth. Tell them there has been some kind of terrible mistake." Ethan's panicked eyes were darting desperately around the room, searching for any possible exit, any potential ally, anyone who might believe whatever lies he was frantically preparing to tell. His gaze finally landed on Sarah, and something shifted in his expression. The charm returned, smooth and practiced and utterly sickening to witness. "Sarah," he said, his voice softening into something almost tender, something designed to manipulate and deceive. "Sarah, please, you know me. We have lived together for years. We are family. I was just going through an incredibly difficult time. The divorce, losing everything I had worked for, feeling like a complete failure. I was lonely and depressed, and I was not thinking clearly. It was a terrible, terrible mistake. But I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I never did anything with those videos. I never shared them with anyone. I never uploaded them anywhere. I looked at them sometimes when I was feeling low. That is all. I am so deeply sorry. I am so sorry for what I did." He was crying now, tears streaming convincingly down his handsome face. The same tears that had gotten him out of trouble and earned him sympathy and forgiveness 1,000 times throughout his charmed life. My mother immediately rose from her chair and rushed to the couch, wrapping her arms protectively around her precious baby boy, glaring at me with pure, undisguised hatred. "Look at what you have done," she hissed at me venomously. "You have upset your brother terribly. He said he was sorry. He said it was a mistake he made during a difficult time. Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic and difficult? Why can you not just accept his apology and let this family move forward?" Sarah's grip on my hand tightened to the point of genuine pain. Her entire body was trembling beside me, vibrating with a barely contained rage that I could feel radiating through her skin like heat. "A mistake," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through steel. "He secretly recorded me naked in my own shower for 18 months, and you are dismissing it as a mistake. He watched me bathe and dress every single day for a year and a half, and you are asking us to simply let it go and move forward. He said he was lonely and struggling." My mother snapped back defensively, still clutching Ethan to her chest like he was a small child who needed protection from bullies. "He has been through so much trauma these past few years. His wife abandoned him, he lost his home. He had to come live here with you too, constantly making him feel unwelcome and inadequate. Can you really blame him for having a moment of weakness during such a difficult period?" Something fundamental inside me shifted and broke in that moment. Not with a dramatic crash, but with a quiet, final snap, like a rope that had been stretched too thin for too many years finally giving way. "Dad," I said, turning to face my father directly, "do you have anything to add to this discussion?" My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly wishing desperately that he could be anywhere else on earth. He had always been the slightly more reasonable of my two parents, the one who occasionally, grudgingly acknowledged my existence and accomplishments. But he was also fundamentally weak, constitutionally incapable of standing up to my mother or holding Ethan accountable for anything he did. "Look," he finally said, his voice tired and defeated, "this is a family matter, and it should be handled privately within the family. There is no need to involve anyone else or blow this out of proportion. Ethan can apologize properly, agree to get some counseling for his issues, and we can all move forward together. Put this unfortunate incident behind us." "Put it behind us?" I repeated slowly, letting each word hang in the air. 247 hours of illegally recorded footage. 18 months of systematic violation of my wife's privacy and dignity. And your considered recommendation is that we should simply put it behind us and move forward as if nothing happened. "Nathan, please try to be reasonable about this," my mother pleaded, her voice carrying that particular wheedling tone she used when she wanted something from me. "He is your brother. He is your own flesh and blood. Family forgives each other. That is what families are supposed to do." I looked over at Sarah. She was staring at my parents with an expression of absolute, unconcealed disgust. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that whatever decision I made in the next few seconds, she would support me completely. She would stand beside me without hesitation, because that was what real family actually did. I rose slowly to my feet, gently pulling Sarah up beside me. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm and cold and absolutely final. "You have exactly 1 hour to pack your belongings and remove yourself from my house. If you are still on my property after that deadline, I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. And then I will turn over all of this evidence to the district attorney's office." "Nathan!" my mother gasped in horror. "You cannot possibly do that to your own brother," my father protested. "I can. This is my house. My name is on every legal document. I have the absolute right to remove anyone I choose from my property. And your son is a criminal who systematically violated my wife for 18 months. Ethan looked up from my mother's protective embrace, his eyes red and swollen, mucus running from his nose, the mask of charm completely shattered. "Nate, please," he begged. "I have nowhere to go. I have nothing. You cannot just throw me out on the street like garbage. We are brothers. You should have considered that before you installed a surveillance camera in my bathroom. 59 minutes remaining. I suggest you start packing immediately." My mother stepped toward me, her face contorted with a fury I had never seen directed at me so openly and viciously before. "Nathan Howard Parker, I am warning you right now. If you do this, if you throw your brother out of your home like this, you will be completely dead to this family. Do you understand what I am telling you? Dead. We will never speak to you again. You will no longer be our son. I had waited my entire life to hear my mother acknowledge my importance to her, to hear her say that I mattered, that she needed me in her life. And now here she was, finally offering me exactly that, but entirely conditional. Contingent on my willingness to ignore my brother's crimes, to sacrifice my wife's dignity and safety on the altar of family harmony, to once again accept that I mattered less than Ethan. I looked at her steadily, directly into her eyes. Then I suppose I am dead, I said. 58 minutes, Ethan. The clock is running. The hour that followed was complete chaos. My mother alternated between screaming accusations and sobbing dramatically. My father made increasingly desperate attempts to negotiate some kind of compromise that would allow everyone to pretend this had never happened. Ethan threw his clothes and possessions haphazardly into garbage bags, cycling between self-pitying tears and bitter curses directed at me for destroying his life. At one point during his packing, he punched a hole directly through the drywall of the guest room. The room I had provided for him rent-free for 3.5 years. The room where he had watched footage of my naked wife on his laptop every night before going to sleep. I observed all of it from a careful distance, feeling strangely detached from the drama unfolding in my own home. These people shared my DNA, my last name, my childhood memories. But they had never truly been my family in any way that actually mattered. They had spent 37 years making me feel small, worthless, invisible, less than. And now, when I finally demanded to be treated with basic human dignity, when I finally refused to sacrifice my wife's well-being for their comfort, they chose Ethan. Exactly as they always had. Exactly as I had always known they would. At exactly 5 o'clock, 58 minutes after I had issued my ultimatum, Ethan walked out my front door carrying 3 bulging garbage bags filled with his possessions. My parents followed close behind him, my mother still weeping dramatically, my father shaking his head slowly in disbelief at what his younger son had done to the family. At the end of the driveway, my mother turned back toward the house one final time. "You will regret this for the rest of your miserable life," she said, her voice dripping with contempt and maternal fury. "Mark my words, Nathan. You will deeply, deeply regret this decision." "Goodbye, Mom," I said simply, and I closed the front door. The weeks and months that followed were consumed by police interviews, legal consultations, and the slow, painful, necessary work of healing. I filed a comprehensive report with the local police department, providing all of the digital evidence I had meticulously gathered. The detective assigned to our case was professional, thorough, and genuinely compassionate, assuring us that the evidence was more than sufficient to pursue serious criminal charges. The district attorney agreed with that assessment. Ethan was arrested, charged with multiple counts of voyeurism and invasion of privacy, and held on bail that my parents could not afford to post. For the first time in his entire golden life, Ethan Parker faced real, serious, inescapable consequences for his actions. The criminal trial took place 8 months after his arrest. It was brutal, exhausting, and emotionally devastating for Sarah. Ethan's defense attorney tried every conceivable legal tactic, arguing that I had illegally accessed his computer, that the evidence was improperly obtained, that Sarah had somehow implicitly consented to surveillance by allowing Ethan to live in our home. The judge rejected every single one of these arguments, ruling that my network monitoring fell within established legal boundaries for protecting one's own property. The jury deliberated for approximately 6 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Ethan was sentenced to 4 years in state prison followed by lifetime registration as a sex offender. My mother collapsed in the gallery, wailing so loudly that court officers had to physically escort her from the room. My father sat in stunned, gray-faced silence. Neither of them looked in my direction even once during the entire proceeding. After the sentencing hearing concluded, Sarah and I walked out of the courthouse together into the bright afternoon sunlight. She stopped on the steps, took both of my hands in hers, and looked directly into my eyes. "It is over," she said quietly. "It is finally truly over." I wished I could agree with her completely. The legal proceedings were finished, yes. Ethan would serve time in prison for what he had done. But I understood that the deeper healing, the psychological recovery from such a profound violation, would take much longer. Perhaps the rest of our lives. About a year after the trial ended, I received an unexpected letter from a law firm I had never heard of. The letter informed me that my grandmother, Eleanor Parker, had left additional detailed instructions in her estate that were only to be executed under very specific conditions. Those conditions, the attorney explained, had now been met. Inside the thick envelope was a handwritten letter in my grandmother's familiar, elegant script, accompanied by several official legal documents. My dearest Nathan, if you are reading this letter, then you have finally done what I always believed you would someday find the courage to do. You have chosen yourself over them. You have recognized at last that you cannot earn love or respect from people who are fundamentally incapable of providing it. And you have walked away from their toxicity forever. I'm so incredibly proud of you. There is something I never told you, a secret I have carried alone for over 40 years. Your father, Howard, is not my biological son. He was adopted as an infant, and his father and I made the decision to keep this truth from him. It seemed like the kindest choice at the time. Now I am no longer certain it was the right one. What matters now is this. Howard has biological siblings, a brother and a sister, who have been searching for him for decades. They are good people, Nathan. Kind, decent, loving people. The kind of family you have always deserved but never had. Their contact information is enclosed with this letter. I do not know if you will choose to reach out to them. That decision is entirely yours to make. But I wanted you to know that you have options. You are not bound forever to the people who failed you so completely. You can choose a different path. You can choose a different family. I love you more than mere words could ever express. I always saw you, Nathan, even when no one else in this family could be bothered to look. Your grandmother, with all my love, Eleanor. I read her letter 4 times before the words fully penetrated. My father was adopted. He had biological siblings who had spent years trying to find him. There was another family somewhere out there, one that might actually welcome me with open arms. I did not tell my father about any of this. He had permanently forfeited the right to know anything about my life when he chose Ethan's comfort over basic human decency. But I did reach out to his biological siblings, 2 people named Margaret and Thomas who had built quiet, happy lives in Oregon. They were absolutely overjoyed to hear from me. They had spent years searching for their lost brother, hoping desperately to reconnect with the family they had been separated from at birth. Meeting me was not the reunion they had originally imagined, but they embraced me anyway, welcoming me into their homes and their lives and their hearts with a warmth and genuine affection I had never once experienced from my own biological parents. Sarah and I are doing well now, more than 2 years after the trial concluded. The nightmares that plagued her sleep have mostly stopped. She can take a shower without compulsively checking every inch of the ceiling for hidden devices. We sold the house where everything happened and bought a new one in a different community. A fresh start completely free from painful memories and associations. We are expecting our first child in the spring. A daughter. We have already decided together that she will grow up knowing without any doubt that she is loved unconditionally, valued completely, seen and heard and cherished. She will never have to wonder, even for a single moment, if she is enough. My brother served 3 years of his 4-year sentence before being released on parole for good behavior. I do not know where he lives now, and I have absolutely no desire to find out. He will carry the permanent mark of his crimes for the rest of his natural life, required to register as a sex offender in whatever community he inhabits, required to inform every neighbor and potential employer of exactly what kind of person he truly is beneath that charming mask. My parents are still alive somewhere, still married, still absolutely convinced that I am the villain of this entire story. I heard through my new extended family that my mother tells anyone who will listen about her ungrateful younger son, who maliciously destroyed her baby's life over some trivial misunderstanding. I find it almost amusing now in a dark and bitter way. After everything that happened, after all the irrefutable evidence, after the trial and the conviction and the prison sentence, she still cannot bring herself to see the truth. She still cannot acknowledge what her golden child actually was beneath all that carefully cultivated charm. But her delusions are no longer my problem to solve or my burden to carry. I spent 37 years desperately seeking approval and validation from people who were constitutionally incapable of providing it. I am completely done with that exhausting, futile pursuit. I have a wife who loves me unconditionally, a daughter on the way, and a new extended family who genuinely want me to be part of their lives. My grandmother was right all along. Charm is just a mask. It is the costume people wear when they do not want you to see what is really hiding underneath. Substance is what matters. And I finally have everything I truly need. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I have left 2 more stories here on your screen. Both from men who discovered that family is not always who you are born to. It is who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be the outsider looking in, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your story matters, even if they tried to erase it.